Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's Mr. Roll here again for week number 9, day number 3. Again, the quick reminders that we gave you yesterday. This is the last week of graded work, so please make sure that you are doing your best to get it done. Also, please come on in and pick up your stuff if you have not had a chance yet. Between 10 and 3 every day, we have staff members here to be able to fetch you your things for your students. They should all be in labeled bags with the students' names on them, and they can go ahead and get that for you when you stop by. If you are unable to make it to the school between 10 o'clock and 3 o'clock, please call us up and let us know. We can either arrange a pickup point for you, or we might be able to even arrange a drop-off for your kiddos' stuff. Okay, so for today, yesterday we talked about the June birthdays, so we could wish everybody in June a happy birthday. We don't want to forget about our kiddos in July. Kids who have birthdays in July are often not recognized by the school because we're out of summer, and we want to make sure that we got you covered. So today we're going to be going over the July birthdays, and if you have your birthday in July, this is a little bit early, but we're going to wish you a very happy birthday. So let's go ahead and cut over to our staff members who are going to read off our July birthdays.
Hi guys, it's Miss Nikki and Mr. Levi here to announce the July birthdays. We have Lucy in 6th grade, Charles in 8th grade, Amir in 3rd grade, Nevaeh in 4th grade, Derek in 1st grade, Alon in 2nd grade,
Anthony in 6th grade, Joseph in 7th grade, Ayla in 1st grade, Zamarius in 7th grade, and Maya in 3rd grade.
You ready?
Yep.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear students. Happy birthday to you.
All right, so it's time for our Pledge of Allegiance now. Please stand at attention wherever you are. If you're wearing a hat, like me, please take it off. Place your right hand over your heart, and let's go ahead and begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for doing that with me. Go ahead and have a fantastic day of online learning, and I'll see you again tomorrow. Take care. Alrighty then, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back for week number 9, day number 3. And I was watching some of my own videos, and I thought to myself, I said, Self, your audio quality is kind of bad. Why don't you try using that super nice mic that you never use to see if it can get any better? So I stopped being lazy. I pulled out the mic. Boo, boo, boo. So hopefully it is better audio today than it has been in a while. If I get lazy again, I might not be using this tomorrow. We'll see. All right, so week number 9, day number 3, let's start off with our agenda today. So in life skills, we're going to be discussing basic high school terminology. Some of the really obvious things that I should have told you a long time ago, which I may or may not have, honestly. I just want to make sure I don't miss it. And, you know, I say a lot of things that you forget, so maybe it's good that we repeat them. Next up, we're going to start talking about supply chains in current events and economics and what those are. Next up, we have history after that. We're going to be talking about Teddy Roosevelt. Yes, it's time for us to get into Khan Academy, all about him. That'll be fun. In literature, we are going to be reviewing chapter 28, and then your homework is chapter 29. In science here, we are doing a review of the chapter at the end of the science book that we've been using this year. At the end of the chapter, they have a review page. Basically, you're just going to be bored with me reading through the review page with you. So that's going to be the review. In Math Group 1, we're doing a lesson on combinations, and in Math Group 2, I don't know how Khan Academy says this, but what it is, basically, it's powers to other powers with negatives. And that sounded really boring, so I added in the woot. See, you know it's fun because of the woot. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's it for the introduction of the agenda. Let's go ahead and get into the day's work. Okay, we're in life skills. I just figured something out that's kind of weird. If you look at this, this is a USB cable that the microphone is plugged into. It is a data cable. But when I do this, you hear that kind of thumping in the background, right? It's acting like an audio cable, like an old school analog audio cable. So I apologize for all the bumping in the back. I think maybe if I could find a shielded or protected USB cable, it might be better. So it was kind of bothering me when I rewatched the intro. Interesting. I didn't know data cables could have that kind of interference. So I'm just going to do my best not to touch it for today. All right, so for life skills, we're going to be talking about some really basic terms. And so the first four basic terms that we're discussing, you have definitely heard before, but maybe you didn't know what they meant. So the first one is freshman. Now, you might be thinking to yourself, but Mr. Roll, I'm a woman. I'm a fresh woman. No, you're not. Freshman just means that you are a first-year student. So everybody in high school starts out as a freshman. They are a first-year student. Next is sophomore. Oops, I forgot to know. Sophomore. And a sophomore, as you may have guessed, is just a second-year student. Very simple. Then we have a junior. And a junior, as you probably have guessed, whoops, add speech. No way, bro. Okay. A junior is a third-year student. Cool. You tracking so far? And then finally we have a senior, and as you guessed, a senior is a fourth-year student. Whoops. So there is something that comes after senior, and so that is a term that is not a formal term, but it is one that you hear bantered about. It's called a super senior. A super senior is not somebody with superpowers. Super senior is a nice way to say somebody that is a fifth-year student. So, ladies and gentlemen, are you supposed to be a 5-year student in high school? No, you're not. Okay, you're supposed to graduate in 4 years. But some people don't have the necessary credits that they need in order to graduate. And so for those people who are taking a 5th year in high school, we call them super seniors. And then last but certainly not least, I know this has happened a few times. This is normally something you see in college, but we also have the super duper senior. And a super duper senior is not a badge to wear with honor. That is a 6th year student. So one day when you get into college, these same terms apply. So these 4 years of high school, you have freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, right? And then when you get to college, it all starts over again. In college, you have freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. And then in college, it's actually pretty common to see super seniors and even super duper seniors. My wife and I, when we were getting our first college degree, what's called an undergraduate degree, we both were super seniors because we both did a little more than 4 years to get our degrees. I took more than 4 years because I did a lot of other stuff other than school, like I worked a lot. And so I didn't take enough credits to graduate, and some people joke that I was too lazy to graduate in 4 years. My wife took more than 4 years because she's really smart, and she decided to get 2 or 3 degrees rather than just one when she was an undergraduate. So, different things, different reasons, right? And so these are some basic terms. Last but not least, a couple other basic terms. We already went over weighted and unweighted. And then we talked about this before, but I just want to remind you, there's a few other terms. So we have AP, which is for advanced placement. These are weighted classes, and they apply for college credit if you take the AP test at the end of the class and get a 3, I'll say a score of 3 or better. It's a scale of 5. Whoops. Scale of 1 to 5. So that's an AP class. It's a weighted class. Again, it will give you college credit if you take the AP test at the end of the class and then get at least a 3 or higher. And then, gives you college credits, which is super slick because then you have college credits before you're in college, which is awesome. AP credits are recognized by all American universities. Whoops. Universities. I can't type very well because I'm really worried about bumping this cable because I'm sure you're hearing a lot of interference. I apologize for that. IB classes, oh, I never know how to spell this. It stands for Inter Baccalaureate or International Baccalaureate, and it's like a fancy pants weighted class. Uh, Weighted class, sometimes for college credit, often not, but looks good on your resume when applying for things. I don't know how to spell Inter Baccalaureate or International Baccalaureate. Sorry, I'm too lazy to look it up right now. So next, CP, college prep. Usually a weighted class. These classes are sometimes used when an AP class does not exist and a community college is partnering with a high school. So CP classes, some high schools do them, some others don't. Just depends on your high school. They're not as common, you know. I think in my high school, which was a big high school I mentioned the other day, I think we only had like 2 CP classes in the entire school, and not all schools do them. It's okay. And then the last term that I wanted to discuss with you today for life skills is called dual enrollment. And again, we've covered all these terms before, but it's a good thing to remind you about them before you set up your high school class schedules. A dual enrollment class is a class that is done usually at your high school, but it is taught by an instructor who has been hired or accredited by the local community college. Community college. The class, once completed and passed, will automatically give you community college credit. Again, these classes will not give you AP credits, they'll give you community college credits. Community college credits are accepted at any Arizona community college or Arizona University. They may or may not transfer out of state. So if you have always dreamed of going to, I don't know, like San Diego or Boston or Oklahoma City or something like that for college, right? If you've always dreamed of traveling for college and leaving the state, when you're in high school, you probably want to stay away from dual enrollment classes. If, like me, you're lazy and you don't want to leave the state, you're okay hanging out and going to University of Arizona or ASU or NAU, then dual enrollment classes are a dream because you don't have to take a test. All you have to do is pass the class and then you'll get college credit. Oh, and last but certainly not least, these classes are always weighted. So again, dual enrollment classes in my book are the best of both worlds if you're staying in Arizona for college. Otherwise, you know, take a look at AP classes. Again, CP classes, every school does them a little differently, and they're kind of like there's no standard way. So look out for those. All right, guys, that's it for life skills today. Hopefully this helps somebody. I don't know. All right, let's go ahead and get started over in economics. All right. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are talking about economics, and today we are we're introducing the idea of supply chains. Supply chains. And so, supply chains are a portion of economics that are really fascinating, and in fact, the idea of managing a supply chain actually was largely invented here in Arizona, which is pretty cool. It was mostly something that was first really invented back in Minnesota, but refined and turned into a field of study here in Arizona, up in Phoenix. And so this is something that is kind of like a homegrown field of economics for us here, which is, well, I think it's pretty cool to have Arizona be so important. So supply chains. What is a supply chain? A supply chain is a set of companies. Whoops, that should be an IES. I'll just do that. A set of companies that provide parts and labor to produce a final good. Most supply chains are completely behind the scenes. So, again, a supply chain is a set of companies that work together to create a certain product. And the more complicated the product, the longer and more complicated the supply chain. So let's talk a second about something that I know more than the average person about. I was going to use cars as the example, but truth be told, I'm not a car expert in any way, shape, or form. But something that I do know a lot about is technology. So let's take a moment and let's talk about iPhones in particular. Okay, let's talk about the iPhone supply chain. Oh no, my printer's printing something, probably for my wife. Okay, there we go. Sorry about all the noise. So, people often call Apple the iPhone maker. And while that's true, if you want to be really pedantic about it, it's not true at all. Apple actually doesn't make iPhones, like at all. So if we talk about how an iPhone is actually made, so in the United States, specifically mostly in California, so this is my bad impression of the United States. So in the US of A, oh, Texas, you're kind of too little there. There you go. We need a bigger Texas. USA. So in the USA, the iPhone is designed. So the technology is designed. So this is the design technology is in the United States. Not even the building. Just the idea. So the idea comes from the United States. Now, the actual memory chip, so when you get an iPhone and your iPhone is like 64 gig or 128 gigs, so you take lots of selfies and your TikTok videos or whatever you kids are doing these days, the actual storage chip inside the phone, so storage chip inside the phone, the storage chips, they're called SSDs. The storage chip or SSD comes from Samsung in Korea. That's my really bad imitation of Korea. That is, so the design is by Apple in the United States. The storage chip or SSD is from Samsung in Korea. Now you might be thinking to yourself, wait a second, Mr. Roll. Samsung makes the Galaxy phone that directly competes with the iPhone. Correct. And so in some places, Samsung competes with Apple. In other places, Samsung works with Apple. It's weird. It's like the frenemies kind of thing. All right. So the actual processor. So the iPhone uses a processor that's usually called the A series. Every iPhone has a new A series, whether it's like the A12, A13, A14, or whatever. The processor is not made by Apple either. The processor comes from a company called TSMC Global. TSMC Global. And that is made on the island. I should probably try to stop drawing geography because it doesn't make a difference for you guys, but whatever. It comes from the island of Taiwan, I believe. I could be wrong about that, but generally, again, so the design is in the United States. The storage chip comes from Korea. The processor comes from Taiwan. What else? Oh, the screen. The screens usually come from either LG, which again, LG manufactures Android phones. So the screens are made by LG, or oftentimes the screens are also made, by Samsung, okay? So we'll say, just for the sake of diversification, we'll say that this particular iPhone's, the screen is made by LG. And a lot of these screens are made in Japan, and Japan is a series of 4 islands, which I will now butcher. 1, 2, that's Honshu up there. Whatever. Okay, Japan. Wow, this is really embarrassing. My art is very bad. Let's see here. What else? So we have the screen, we have the storage chip, we have the processor, we have the design. Oh, and the manufacturing. Where is all this stuff built? Well, Apple doesn't build the iPhone. Apple pays another company in China. So here, now I shall butcher the geography of China. Ooh, well, that looks awful. Okay, that is the worst China ever. So, Apple pays a company in China called Foxtron. And this is for the manufacturing. So, again, the design is from Apple. So Apple sends the designs for what it wants to do to TSMC Global. It sends the designs for what it wants to do to Samsung. It sends its designs over to Japan for LG. And then each one of these send their products. So TSMC sends the Apple designed processor over to Foxtron in China. Samsung sends the Apple designed solid state drive, or the Apple spec solid state drive, to manufacture in China. LG sends the Apple spec screen to the manufacturing in China. And then in China, they put everything together. And so everything comes back together. It gets assembled in China. And then it all gets sent back to Apple. And then we get the iPhone. Yay! Okay? And that's where iPhones come from, kids. That's where iPhones come from. It's the talk, but for technology, right? So anyway, this is a very oversimplified version of a supply chain. So kids, when a company makes something these days, typically they don't make that thing. They make a portion of the thing, and usually the company that makes the thing is only designing the thing. But all of the parts for that thing come from other places. And the path where all of those parts come together and form that product, that is what we call the supply chain. Now, if you look at this here, the supply chain is very delicate because we have all this design happening in the United States. In Korea, we have these storage chips being manufactured. In Taiwan, we have, we have the processor. In Japan, we have the screens, and then it's all being put together in China. So, if any of these countries have a disaster, for instance, Japan had an earthquake that was really bad a number of years ago, and one of their nuclear power plants in Fukushima, the Fukushima nuclear reactor, had to be shut down because it was spewing radiation out. The entire country of Japan came to a bit of a standstill because of this earthquake and this almost nuclear disaster. And so things that were made in Japan, such as screens for smartphones, had a huge delay. And so a lot of manufacturers who bought screens or other things from Japan, they had to be patient. And in fact, a lot of storage chips that aren't made in Korea are made in Thailand. And in Thailand, every now and again, they get these really bad floods. And so sometimes the floods in Thailand are so bad that computer manufacturers like Dell and even Apple can't make their prescribed shipping times when people buy stuff because they can't get it. And so supply chains work in really interesting ways like this. And in fact, kids, some really weird things happen again. Apple buying stuff from LG and Samsung, and vice versa. And so, anyway, that is our introduction today to supply chains and how the world works. And so, that is our lesson in economics. Thanks, guys. Ooh. All right, it got kind of dark all of a sudden, and so I changed the lighting in here. Okay, good. Looks like we're going. All right, so let's talk about history. So today we get to uh, talk, I guess, formally about Teddy Roosevelt because we have a Khan Academy lesson about him. Facts about Teddy Roosevelt. You've already heard me go wax on and on about him because, I have like a history crush on him or whatever. But Teddy Roosevelt was a really cool guy. In a lot of ways, there are many parallels between Teddy Roosevelt in some ways and even today, our president, Donald Trump. And so, a couple of the interesting parallels that I think we can see between those two famous men is both Teddy Roosevelt and Donald Trump were born into fabulous wealth. All right. Teddy Roosevelt's parents were ultra rich people who, they had butlers and servants and so on and so forth for Roosevelt growing up. And so he never really had any reason to want. And in fact, when Roosevelt went to college, he was kind of a jerk. Like, people talk about Roosevelt's attitude in college as being just awful because Teddy Roosevelt was all about who was wearing the latest designer clothes, whose family was connected to what rich, wealthy person. He was all about who you knew, and he even wrote papers for college about why poor people didn't matter. And so Teddy Roosevelt was a real jerk in college, right? And so, in a similar way, Donald Trump was raised in fabulous wealth. Donald Trump, when he first started his business empire, I think he said something like his dad loaned him $9 million to start his first company. And then when his dad passed away, everything that his dad had went to him. And, the numbers vary, but they think it's somewhere not quite $500 million, but they know it's more than $400 million that Donald Trump inherited from his dad. So again, raised fabulously wealthy. So both Trump and Teddy Roosevelt. So Trump and Roosevelt were both raised. The old saying is with a silver spoon in their mouths, right? But the similarities don't stop there. Donald Trump and Teddy Roosevelt both created their image around like the ordinary guy, right? And so Teddy Roosevelt was beloved by the common people. He was a fabulously famous president. People were crazy about him, and he did this by leveraging the media of his day. So Roosevelt was a talented politician, but he was also an excellent writer. He was incredibly interested in science. He loved the natural world, and he wrote prolifically. Roosevelt wrote some astronomical number of books. Like, Roosevelt wrote more than 40 books, like actual books in his life, and several of them are science textbooks. He was a rancher for a long period of time, and while he was on his ranch, he wrote books about being a rancher, and his books became incredibly famous, and they became kind of the romantic image of what it was to be like a cowboy, came from Theodore Roosevelt's experience and then his writings about being on the ranch. And so he wrote to what was then the big form of entertainment and information. He was an active participant in national newspapers, and so he was a columnist in newspapers. He was a what do you call it? He was an everyday person. I'll just describe it because the term is escaping me right now. But he was a name that everybody knew before he was president for all of his writing and his interesting stories. He was famous again before running for office, just because he was so interesting. Okay, and it's neat because in a similar way we can see the way that Donald Trump leveraged the media of our day to become famous as well. Donald Trump, he doesn't really write books. He probably has a ghostwriter write it for him, but he's done a great job leveraging the media today, which is television. And so Donald Trump has appeared famously on television many times, and he's kind of created this cult following, from his show The Apprentice, where everybody talks about his business savvy and stuff like that. And so both Theodore Roosevelt and Donald Trump used the media of their day to become big names in American life before entering the political sphere as somebody who was running for the president. And in addition to the way they were raised, fabulously wealthy, and the way that they became famous by leveraging the media of their time, they also both ran their campaigns for president as being somebody who stood up for the average guy. Of course, Trump, we all know, like, make America great again. The average person has got like a bum deal. Let's make things better for them, right? Teddy Roosevelt was very much similar, right? He wanted the square deal. Okay, wait, was that Teddy? Yeah, that was square deal, Roosevelt, right? Ooh, or was it Wilson, the chicken in every pot, and then depression? Anyway, I should go look that up. Teddy Roosevelt was in it to win it for the average citizen. And he had done some really, really good work. Yesterday we were talking about the progressives and how the progressives were trying to stop these unfair labor practices where you would have entire clothing factories based out of like 3 or 4 apartments where people were almost literally chained in the apartments. They couldn't leave, right? Teddy Roosevelt, when he held various posts in New York, he actively worked to end that. So Teddy Roosevelt worked in when he wasn't a rancher, he worked in New York, up in the capital of New York, up in Albany, and in New York City, in several elected positions, and he helped end these really terrible practices that would sometimes even kill children, because they'd be working too hard in these factories that had no ventilation, and so he was in it for the little guy. He was in it to change the way things were and make life in America more fair and equitable for all people who lived in America. So Theodore Roosevelt was, in a very, very real sense, a progressive who earned his fame through hard work and diligently working for the people. And so he, even though he got this fabulous reputation, again, very much like Donald Trump, the Republican Party hated him. Okay, and if you remember, when Trump was, actually, you probably are too young, but when Trump was running for office back in 2016, a lot of Republicans were upset that he was the one running for office. Yeah, and so in a very similar way, Teddy Roosevelt, when he was becoming the rising star of the Republican Party, he stood for a lot of things that a lot of Republicans were uncomfortable with. So during this period of time, and in fact for most of the history of the party, Republicans were the party that represented business. And so Republicans have always been low regulations, pro-business, and Teddy Roosevelt, even though he believed in the free market and in business, because he had stopped so many factories that were treating their workers poorly, and because he had helped invent so many different regulations and laws that protected the little guy and made companies pay what they were supposed to pay their workers, because he held companies accountable like that, many in the Republican Party hated Teddy Roosevelt. And Teddy Roosevelt, even though he was so famous all over America for his writings and the great things that he did, even though he was famous all over the country and people loved him, the Republican Party disliked him. In fact, a lot of them hated him. And so the Republican president, William McKinley, was trying to figure out what to do with Teddy Roosevelt. Teddy Roosevelt became the president, or he became the governor of New York. So he was the governor of the entire state. And so actually, McKinley and the other Republicans were kind of afraid that he would pull a Donald Trump, where Donald Trump ran in the primary election and he became the candidate for the Republican Party in the election. Most of the Republican establishment did not want him. They would have rather had someone like Marco Rubio or something like that. And so they were afraid that Teddy Roosevelt would run for president, and he would because he was so wildly popular and President McKinley was not nearly as popular. They were afraid that then Governor Teddy Roosevelt would take over the party. Okay, and so what the Republicans did, in a really clever move to shut Teddy Roosevelt up, to make him so he would just kind of fade away and people would forget about him, they found the perfect position for Teddy Roosevelt that would make him so he was completely unimportant and no one would care about him. They made Teddy Roosevelt the Vice President of the United States. And so William McKinley decided that in order to get rid of Teddy Roosevelt, so that nobody would be thinking that he'd be the president and everybody would be focusing on him, he gave him the vice presidency, which, if you have been in my history class, you know is probably one of the worst jobs in politics. And so Teddy Roosevelt became the vice president because he couldn't say no. If he said no, it would have been a political disaster because everybody would have thought that he was being not dishonest. He was being not unfaithful. He wasn't. They would all think that he was too greedy, because he'd been offered such a high position and he wasn't taking it. But kids, in reality, the vice president doesn't do very much. And so when Teddy Roosevelt was given the office of vice president, of course he accepted the office of the vice presidency, but he was depressed. He was so upset that the Republicans would stab him in the back by making him the vice president that he slipped into a deep depression. And the way that he dealt with that is he went on vacation. And he went on just not a normal vacation. He went on a vacation that was supposed to last 3 or more months. And this vacation was away from his family, away from his friends. He and one buddy decided to hike the mountains in California. And so again, they didn't have airplanes back then. So he took a train all the way to California from Washington, D.C. And he was going to spend months alone with his buddy, camping and backpacking through California and the different state parks out there, because he was just so incredibly depressed. And that's when President William McKinley was shot, making Teddy Roosevelt the vice president who they'd been trying to keep quiet and kind of, throw away to the back shelf of history. That's when Teddy Roosevelt became the president. And the rest is history. So anyway, that's our introduction to Teddy Roosevelt. I know I took a really long time, but he's one of my favorite people. He's so cool. Teddy Roosevelt is awesome. And it's really weird how many parallels you can see between Roosevelt and Trump. Whether you love Trump and that makes you love Roosevelt more, or whether you don't like Trump and maybe that makes you dislike Roosevelt, either way, the parallels are super interesting with the way that they both kind of leveraged the different tools that they had available to them and just how similar they were. So we'll talk more at Roosevelt tomorrow. That's it for today. Go ahead and watch whatever Khan Academy has to say about Roosevelt. I'm sure that's interesting too. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's time for literature and a little peek behind the curtain on how this is made. I'm recording this video backwards today, so like I started with math and I'm moving my way back. And I just realized I've been wearing this shirt the whole time, and it's kind of like mean because it says "Get in, loser" at the top. I just want to explain that so I don't have to go back and re-record like 30 minutes of lesson. It's a quote from the movie Mean Girls. I don't know if you ever saw it. It like came out the year most of you were born, I think. And it's a joke that the girls will say to each other, "Get in, loser, it's time to go shopping." But this shirt is a nerdy joke about Elon Musk and the Cybertruck. And so it's "Get in, loser," and that's a Cybertruck, and it says, "We're going to Mars," because the Cybertruck design everybody thinks was originally Elon Musk's design for the Mars rover that he's inventing because he's Elon Musk and he does things like that. So anyway, I apologize. I don't mean to offend anyone by a shirt that says "Get in, loser." And as a mature adult, I should probably patrol my wardrobe better. I don't know. Anyway, so in yesterday's chapter of The Adventures of Tom Sawyer, chapter 28, I want to say, the real joke about the Temperance Tavern comes in when Huck and Tom are looking for clues. I think they're looking for clues about Joe and where he hid the treasure, and they stumble upon him. And so Joe is super passed out and drunk in the back of the Temperance Tavern in a secret room where they serve, I think it was whiskey, and he is like passed out. And when the boys see him, it's almost like they saw a bear, and they get really scared and they run clear across town to talk about it. And so they kind of realize that the Temperance Tavern is not so much it's not so ethical as it pretends to be because it serves alcohol. And then they come up with this plan, right? And so remember, Huckleberry Finn's his parents are kind of good for nothing. Tom has his aunt, and she keeps him in line, and so he has to be home every night. He's there with his brother, et cetera, et cetera. Huckleberry Finn just does whatever he wants. He runs around town or whatever. And so the plan is that Tom and Huck will work together, and Huckleberry Finn will watch all night. And if Joe leaves, then Huck will follow him, and so they can figure out where the treasure is. And so that's like their big plan, right? And so tonight you need to read chapter 29. Again, we only have a few more days of this. You got to do your 5 times each words and your dictionary definitions. And in chapter 29, we kind of shift gears a little bit. I don't mean to spoil any endings for you, but the focus goes less from like murder and intrigue and treasure and more back to girls. So anyway, please read that chapter, and that's it for literature. Wait, where is this? There we go. All right, ladies and gentlemen, today for science class, all we are doing is we are reading through the review of the chapter together and just discussing it a little bit so that when we answer some questions tomorrow and the day after, you will have all your answers. So, in the first part of this chapter, we talked about the physics concept of work. So, as it says right here, work is done on an object when a force causes that object to move some distance. And so, remember, when you have work, you have to have force and distance. If you have force but no distance, there is no work. The amount of work done on an object is equal to the force on the body is equal to the force on the object in the direction of its motion, multiplied by the distance the object moves. And so we can calculate work by taking the force multiplied by the distance. So it's a pretty easy equation. And so in this first section, we had the term work, which we just discussed, and then we have the term joule. And a joule is the unit that measures work. It's also called a Newton meter, if you guys remember that. Okay, let's move on to the second section in the chapter. So we talked about mechanical advantage and efficiency. So I guess we'll just read through it. A machine makes work easier by changing the direction or amount of force needed to accomplish a task. The efficiency of a machine is the percentage of the input work that is changed to output work. So first up, again, what is a machine? Well, a machine is something that makes work easier, right? And so it can change the direction of force, or it can change the amount of force needed to accomplish it. And so if the amount of force is increased, then the distance is decreased, and vice versa. Wait, is that right? If the amount of force is increased, then if the amount of force is increased, then the distance is also increased. And if the amount of force is increased, then the distance is decreased, and then vice versa. Okay, I'm confusing myself here. I should just move on, okay? And then we talked about efficiency, and so we can measure efficiency by how much force is put in and then how much force we get out, and that gives us our efficiency rating by doing simple division. So we have the amount of force that goes out, the output work, divided by the amount of force that goes in, or the input work, and that gives us our efficiency. Now, remember, in real life, no machine is 100% efficient in the real world. It just doesn't work like that. Okay, next up, we talked about mechanical advantage. Oh, sorry, we're recording right now. Sorry about that. So the mechanical advantage of a machine is obtained by dividing the output force by the input force. And so very much like the efficiency here, so we have the output work, the amount of work we get out, divided by the amount of work that we put in, okay? Mechanical advantage is the same way. So the amount of force that we're getting out divided by the amount of force we're putting in. And remember, we can have a mechanical advantage that is greater than 1, less than 1, or equal to 1. If the mechanical advantage is equal to 1 in theoretical terms, then we will have a machine that's changing direction. If the mechanical advantage is greater than 1, then it is making we are increasing the mechanical advantage, and we are lessening the you put it in. Gosh, I'm forgetting some of this. If the output force is greater than the input force, then we have a greater distance that we're covering. Okay? Anyway, the ideal mechanical advantage of a machine is the mechanical advantage that it would have if there were no friction. Now, again, in real life, we have things called friction and entropy, and that's why we never get 100% efficiency. And the ideal mechanical advantage is the theoretical one if you were doing this in a vacuum tube or in a lab or something like that, where there was no friction. And so here are the key terms. Again, we have machine, and we talked about a machine. We have the input force that goes into the machine, the output force, which is the force that comes out of the machine, mechanical advantage, which is this right here, the output force divided by the input force, efficiency, which is the up here, the output work divided by the input work, and then the actual mechanical advantage and ideal mechanical advantage. Ideal mechanical advantage is the mechanical advantage done in a vacuum with no friction. And the actual mechanical advantage is the mechanical advantage that we see in real life. If you hear something in the background, that's baby. She's laying down over there. So, okay, let's move on to section number 3. So in section 3, we begin to discuss the 6 types of simple machines. And so let's go ahead and read. There are 6 basic kinds of simple machines: the inclined plane, the wedge, the screw, the lever, the wheel and axle, and the pulley. Now remember, the inclined plane is kind of the basis for most of them, okay? So the inclined plane is just something like this. And remember, a wedge is simply 2 inclined planes put together like that. A screw is an inclined plane around a cylinder, yeah? And then we get into the lever, wheel and axle, and pulley, which again are all different things than an inclined plane, but they like the lever and wheel and axle actually borrow some similar features from inclined planes. So a compound machine is a machine that is made from 2 or more simple machines. So we have, again, the simplest machines, which are these 6, and then a compound machine is made up of 2 or more of those. All right, and so we already talked about wedge, screw. Remember, a lever is like a seesaw, or gosh, what's another simple lever? Like a hammer claw to take nails out of a wall. We have the fulcrum, which is the center point, and when we have the seesaw or the lever. Wheel and axle, which we talked about. There's different versions of that, like a screwdriver or a car. We have the pulley system, where you have the wheel with the ropes, yeah. And then we have a compound machine, which we just discussed, which is multiple simple machines put together. And then we have gears, which is a form of the pulley system, which we had read through a couple days ago. All right, finally moving on, machines in the human body. So the human body makes use of all of these different kinds of machines. Most of the machines in your body are levers that consist of bones with muscles attached to them. Remember, we talked about bones and muscles and how muscles can only constrict. They can only, They can only contract. They don't expand. And so the way that your body handles these levers is they have muscles on 2 sides of the bone, right? And so like your bicep, like we talked about, when the bicep contracts, it lifts your arm up. And then when the tricep on the bottom contracts, it pulls your arm down, yeah? and that all is working with your elbow, which is a kind of lever. So when you bite into something, your front teeth use the principle of the wedge, and we talked about that too. And then a key term, whoops, I keep on touching the cable. I don't want to do that. Key term is 1010. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, that's it for our review for today. Tomorrow we're going to have some questions, and many of the answers to the questions in tomorrow's science are going to be found in this review. So make sure that you remember to go back to this review if you don't remember some of the content that we just covered. All right, thanks. Let's go ahead and jump into math group number 1. Group number 1. So, get my creaky chair set. All right, we've been talking a lot about probabilities, theoretical probabilities, experimental probabilities, independent versus dependent probabilities, and today we're talking about combinations. Now, believe it or not, combinations and probabilities actually are closely related in terms of math. And so that's why we are working on combinations now at the same time as we're doing probabilities. So let's go ahead and read through together. Mrs. Logan's students have to read any 2 of the following books. You see that? Other teachers make their students read not 1, but 2 books on their own. I make you read just 1, and I do it with you. Ha! See? Mr. Roll's too nice. All right, so number 1, Adventures of Tom Sawyer. That's a good book, huh? Yeah. Call of the Wild by Jack London, another great one. Christmas Carol by Charles Dickens. Treasure Island by Robert Louis Stevenson. Or Tuck Everlasting by Natalie Babbitt. How many possible combinations of books could the students choose? A combination is a grouping of objects or events in which the order does not matter. For example, the letters A, B, and C can be arranged in 6 different ways. Okay, oh, how come it's not letting me zoom in? Oh, there we go. Oh, too far. Okay, good. You can have ABC, ACB, BCA, BAC, CAB, and CBA. Since the order does not matter, each arrangement represents the same combination. One way to find possible combinations is to make a list. So actually just sitting down and writing each and every one and making sure you don't repeat, etc., right? So using a list to find combinations. How many different combinations of 2 books are possible from Miss Logan's list of 5 books? And so as you can see right here, so begin by listing all the possible groupings of books, taken 2 at a time. So all of this column right here, okay, in that first column, they only choose book 1. And then in this column, they only choose book 2, only choose book 3, only choose book 4, only choose book 5, okay? And so if we look at this here, we have all of our different combinations. However, remember that in a combination, the order doesn't matter. So therefore, if we have a combination that goes 1, 2, and then another combination right next to it that goes 2, 1, these aren't 2 different combinations. 1, 2 and 2, 1 are the same combination. So you have to cancel one of those out, okay? So, and in fact, that's what this says right here. Because order does not matter, you can eliminate repeated pairs. For example, 1, 2 is already listed, so 2, 1 can be eliminated. So we go through here and we eliminate all of the different repeats, and it's kind of interesting. You see the pattern that it makes, like it's almost like it's going down and over when you're eliminating the repeats, right? It's not an accident, by the way. There are 10 different combinations of 2 books on Mrs. Logan's reading list of 5 books. And so there's 10 different ways we can combine these 5 books in sets of 2. All right? So you can also use a tree diagram. Oh, is baby talking? Oh, wow. Anyway, you can also use, she just started talking. Very excited for that. If you've never had a baby in your family, you wouldn't understand. That's okay. You can also use a tree diagram to find possible combinations. So let's go ahead and look at this. As a caterer, Kwong offers 4 vegetable choices: potatoes, corn, peas, and carrots. Each person can choose 2 vegetables. How many different combinations of 2 vegetables can a person choose? I got something in my eye. Ooh. All right, first let's understand the problem. So we have to rewrite the question as a statement, or we don't have to, but we can. Find the number of possible combinations of 2 vegetables a person can choose. List the important information. There are 4 vegetable choices in all. Number 2, make a plan. We have a tree diagram that shows all the different combinations. So you see potatoes can be paired up with corn, peas, or carrots, right? Corn can be paired up with potatoes, peas, and carrots. Peas, same thing. Carrots, same thing. The tree diagram shows 12 possible ways to combine two vegetables, but each combination is listed twice. So there are 12 divided by 2 equals 6 possible combinations. Okay. Again, so we have two vegetable choices, and we have 4 vegetables to choose from, 6 total options. Okay. By the way, did you notice here that that there's no easy way just to do this? You can't just say, okay, well, I have 2 choices here and 4 choices here, so 2 times 4 is 8. If you do that, you're going to get it wrong, because actually there's only 6 possible combinations. Okay, and so you can't just sit there and say, okay, well, I have to pick 2, and then there are like 5 of them to choose from, so I'm just going to multiply 2 times 5 is 10. I'm done. You can't do that. You actually have to sit through and kind of reason it out. Okay. You can also check by making a list. The potatoes can be paired with 3 other vegetables. Corn can be paired with 2 others. Peas with 1. The total number of pairs comes to 3 plus 2 plus 1 equals 6. All right, and so using those 2 different methods, we're going to be doing some questions tomorrow. So we have the tree diagram and making a list. And so starting tomorrow, we're going to be working on figuring these problems out using those 2 different methods. Now, when you have this work tomorrow, we're going to do a couple of these questions, and you need to show your work. Like, we need to actually see the work. Later on, we can show you how to do this mathematically. If you are coming back to Da Vinci Tree and you're not going to high school next year, we'll be covering the mathematical ways to do this next year. But for now, you need to understand the concept and be able to kind of reason through it when you're doing this. Okay. Today, we're going to let you off with no homework. We just taught the lesson today, and tomorrow we actually have the questions that you're going to be working on. All right, so group number 1, that concludes your day of online learning. You're good to go. You're free. Ha! Well, actually, you still have to do the other homework assignments, but after that, you're free. All right. Is it going? Hey, it works. Okay. All right. Hey, group number 2. I'm going to be a little bit lazy today, and I'm going to just make you watch the Khan Academy video in order to review how to do this concept. So you've done this concept before in class with me. We are taking powers to new powers. So it's like if we have, let's say we have, we talked about Lucy yesterday. So let's say we have a t for Tegan. And so it's t to the 3rd power. And we take that to the 4th power, just like that. And so remember, when we're taking a power to a power, we just multiply both of the powers there. Whoops, I'm too high up on the page. Anyway, we get t to the 12th power, because 3 times 4 is 12. Yeah? Now, another thing that we discussed here, let's say we have a j for Julio. And so we have a j to the 5th power. And we take that to the 8th power. Again, equals j to the 40th power, because 5 times 8 is 40. However, if one of these is a negative, let's say it's j to the 5th power taken to the negative 8th power, remember, a positive times a negative equals a negative, and the same thing applies for exponents there. And so we get j to the negative 40th power. Now, another way to write j to the negative 40th power is 1 over j to the 40th power. So there's all kinds of little tricks that you need to remember when doing this. The last thing that I want to remind you of is when we are multiplying or dividing, remember, a positive times a positive always equals a positive, positive, negative, 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 positive, negative, 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 positive. Or you can just remember the simple rule of thumb that when we are doing this, if you have 1 negative in your multiplication division problem, it's always going to be negative. Like if you have a odd number of negatives, it's always going to be negative. And if you have a positive number of negatives, or 0, then it's always going to be positive. Why did I say that? Did I say positive? No, if you have an even number of negatives, or 0, it's always going to be positive. Okay. All right, that's it. I'm going to stop talking before I confuse myself more. Group number 2, go ahead and watch the Khan Academy video. Even though I think that most of you can do this without too much trouble, I really do like the way that Sal Khan breaks down some of the more complicated concepts of this. when we're not using like variables like j or t. He talks about when we're using numbers, we can actually break the number down and factor the number so that it combines with other numbers without us having to actually take like the number 3 to the 95th power or something crazy like that. We can factor down other numbers around it to make them the same and then combine them. It's kind of interesting and kind of nerdy and fun. Well, if you're a nerd like me. All right, so I'll go ahead and let you go now. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.